Hello, everybody. Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. Hope you all have had a wonderful week. Hope you all are ready to get back in the swing of things here and talk a little bit of conference realignment and, frankly, a lot of bit of Pac-12. Pac-12 on the docket today. A number of news and notes. Really, it's fairly loaded here today because we've had two Dennis Dodd stories since I last spoke to you. One concerning San Diego State. The other concerning the length of this Pac-12 TV deal. And I don't mean length in terms of years when it actually gets signed, but length of how long this process has been drawn out without any sort of conclusion on it to this point. We also have, let me just pull up my list here, in Jon Wilner's latest mailbag, an interesting discussion that I'm going to push back on a little bit about Oregon and Washington and whether or not they would take a reduced revenue share in the Big Ten when they get there. Jon Wilner even discussed Tulane and Rice as potential expansion options for the Pac-12, which I guess is not the first time overall that I've heard that, but it is the first time I believe I've seen Wilner really give any level of credence to it. Now, these are not frontline expansion options necessarily for the Pac-12, but they are apparently still options in some form, which that is generally not going to be a great thing if that is who you're talking about as expansion options. But we all know the situation that the Pac-12 is in here and now. Arizona's president, who has been very vocal and did give some more quotes to Dennis Dodd that are new from what that article was I guess that was like a week ago. Some even updated quotes from the Arizona president, who is in Kazakhstan right now. I'm pretty sure the same country that Borat was from. That's where the president of the University of Arizona is at right now, if that tells you anything about how close or lack thereof the Pac-12 TV deal might be here at the moment. But there's a lot to dive into on that front as well. If we have time for it, Texas Tech has hired a new men's basketball coach. Bob Huggins had some real, I was going to say words of wisdom, but I don't know that it's even fair to characterize it as words of wisdom. It was warning shots. Bob Huggins fired some real warning shots across the bow of the incoming schools to the Big 12 as far as how difficult this league is in hoops. I would say, like, particularly Houston, and I know that's the way it was labeled on the field of 68 when they got this quote from Bob Huggins. But it was really geared toward everybody if you do listen to the quote that Bob Huggins had. So there is a lot to cover. There is a lot to cover here today. So that's what I have lined up for you. You guys know you can control some of the content here. I know I'm getting going a little bit earlier here tonight. Something I should really try to do as we're now past this craziness of the end of hoop season where I was juggling that and all of this is I should try to get a more steady time set for you every Sunday so everybody can come to expect that. I think we may have a little more of a late arriving crowd here tonight because of the fact that I am going earlier tonight. And honestly, I feel like this time probably works better for just about everyone. So stay on me, guys. Stay on me. Annoy me about setting a time, like trying 7:30 and actually sticking to a damn time. All right. I promise to you, I will be better with that as we move forward. But those of you that are new, if you haven't been here before, you know that you can, I'm about to tell you here, you can control some of the content yourself and get your question or comment in. You click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you get your question or comment in on the chat tonight. And cuts through everything else in the chat, supersedes everything else that is there, and is the one way to guarantee that your voice is heard here on the chat tonight. So you can do that. You can also like the video. That is totally free. Another way to support the channel, just give me one click. As long as you like the video, that helps me out as well, helps me with the YouTube algorithm. If you are somebody that is catching this after the fact, another way you can do that to help drive up the engagement on the video is just leave a comment. Leave a comment on the video, and that also really does help. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you're catching this after the fact and you want to support the channel as well, that is another way to do so. And I believe with that, that is pretty much all that I need to tell you as of right now. Let's get off and running, and we'll start with my friend Juan, Houston fan. Juan says, "Go Cougs," and I appreciate you, Juan. Thank you for being here as always. Juan says, "Go Cougs. Let's talk latest expansion reporting." Hey, I've got it. I've got you covered. I've got Wilner. I've got Dodd. Those are really the two here. I didn't find a whole heck of a lot from Canzano this week, which kind of a relief. Kind of a relief. That's my type of show. Cali Hawk says the time works great as a West Coaster. Yes. Okay. Let's start with the Tulane thing, since that is what's teased on the video here, and I am generally pretty bad about getting to that right off the bat. So it is a question that was asked in Jon Wilner's mailbag, which was filled with, I think, good questions and good information from him this week as far as what's going on in Pac-12 country right now. He said, hypothetical situation, Tulane is seen as team 13 by the Pac-12. Who do you think is the best fit for team 14? Fresno State, Colorado State, or anybody else? So the assumption there would be that the Pac-12 obviously has 10 teams right now. Number 11 would be San Diego State. More on them in a moment because Dennis Dodd had a really good article about that. And then if they are going to be 10 and 11, okay, let me start this over. You'd have 11 San Diego State. You'd have 12 SMU. 13 would be Tulane. And I think that does make sense. You get the major market of New Orleans and Tulane. You look at their football program right now. Obviously, they've had some really good times here lately under Willie Fritz. That's a football program that may be able to compete. And academically, they match the profile that the Pac-12 really wants. So I understand how we arrive there at Tulane being team number 13. So then the question here is, in this hypothetical scenario, the Pac-12 is adding 4 teams, I guess, going all in for more inventory here. Who would be team number 14 after Tulane? And it's interesting, even though we've seen Colorado State mentioned before, right? That was a John Canzano piece where he talked about the Pac-12 exploring Colorado State, which to me had to mean that there was at least some conversation or some thought that you might lose Colorado. Instead, he goes straight to Rice. Jon Wilner says in that situation, Rice would be the clear front runner as number 14. If you had Dallas with SMU and New Orleans with Tulane, it only makes sense to include Houston with Rice in that expansion. I just don't. I mean, it says what's more, Tulane and Rice work academically. The former is number 44 in the U.S. News and World Report rankings. The latter is number 15. Both are members of the prestigious American Association, or the Association of American Universities, rather. Both are R1 research schools. I mean, so he says academically they're no-brainers, which, like, okay, of course, but like, can you stomach? I mean, we've seen the line repeated by Wilner a couple of times now that like the Pac-12 could really, like, SDSU is just a total no-brainer right now that they've made the national championship game in basketball because the Pac-12 needs a PR win, and that would be a big PR win. He's going to go on to say it's not likely that they expand to 14, and I agree that's not a very likely scenario. I wouldn't think for the Pac-12. But if you talk about PR wins, I mean, that is just a mega PR loss. If Tulane and Rice, and no offense to those schools, I mean nothing by that. I certainly can't talk about Tulane after my Sugar Bowl squad lost this year at home to Tulane in football. I mean it is no sign of disrespect, but that is going to be a news cycle loss. That will absolutely be a news cycle L. If there is any, even if it gets to the point where there's serious conversation of it. You know, it was a news cycle L when George Kliavkoff was spotted at SMU, even scouting that one out. What are people going to think if it winds up being Tulane and Rice that are next on that list that you're going towards? That would just not be good for anybody involved, I don't think there. And you're going straight to the academic stuff. The Pac-12 cares too much about that. I mean, I'm just to the point where that has become very clear here. Like if Rice becomes next in line simply because of their academics for that, combined with the media market, I get it, but man, I don't know. Fresno State, Colorado State seems like there would be more potential there in terms of what their football program could be. Like, anybody have Rice football turning into anything in 10 years? You know, I think like people around the Big 12, at least there are some questions about what could even happen with Houston football. Dana Holgerson is like outwardly wondered, is Houston football actually ready for this jump to the Big 12? We're talking about Rice, man. I mean, no offense, Rice. This is not meant to be just a total drive-by of you and just a side swipe of Rice, but good Lord, what are we actually talking about there? And Wilner goes on to say, but are they financially additive? They would add inventory in the central time zone, but that's only a part of the valuation calculation. And do they clear the bar competitively? You could make the case for Tulane perhaps, but Rice is a stretch. Yeah, Rice is a stretch. And I think Tulane would probably, I mean, if they're still going to keep this thing rolling at the level that Willie Fritz has had it at lately, I mean, they would be fine. They would do okay in the Pac-12. They certainly wouldn't be an albatross on the league, I don't think. But Rice would be. Rice absolutely would be. There's no doubt about that. So I just don't. I mean, I don't see. Anyway, you're talking about being additive. Like, come on, man. Those media markets are great, but that you are not pulling the Houston media market. You're not even registering in the Houston media market by taking in Rice. He finishes it off by saying adding campuses in Dallas, Houston, and New Orleans massively expands the footprint of the conference, and I'm not convinced the presidents are interested in that strategic outcome. So while it's fascinating to contemplate, we are extremely skeptical that the Pac-12 would have more than 2 members. Yeah, I mean, end of the day, I think that is correct. I don't think it would be a smart move for the Pac-12 to move to 14. I think they need to hit the threshold for just enough inventory and just few enough teams to be splitting this pie with, right? There's a sweet spot there. That to me would seem to be 12, especially now with the San Diego State thing. I think you're going to have to add them. And even if you wanted it to just be 11, that could be fine too, because there was a blurb about that actually in I believe that was one of the Dennis Dodd articles. Yeah, it was. Let me read you that. It says, left is to decide whether another team accompanies the Aztecs or not. So we're talking San Diego State here. The Pac-12 is down to 10 schools. There is speculation SMU could link up with SDSU to make it 12 again. And here's another quote from Robert Robbins at Arizona. It says, quote, I think you could play with 11 teams. There is speculation we could go with 9 teams. We could go back to the Pac-8, but that's not ideal. You can do it with 11. So what's left for SDSU to make its case? Football has been bowl eligible 13 straight years. There's a sparkling new stadium. Basketball is cheap, but it's never been done at the school. Okay. So that's Robert Robbins saying, like, hey, we could do 11. If all we wanted to do was add San Diego State, we could do 11. And honestly, I would explore that if I were the Pac-12. I think that's absolutely worth exploring. If you don't, and sorry to all the SMU fans who have definitely jumped into this Twitter battle here lately between Big 12 and Pac-12, but if they're not going to be additive to the conference, you definitely need to go add San Diego State for sure. But you could stop there. If that creates a bigger pie for you to split everything up, if that creates enough inventory for TV, I mean, these are the questions. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that creates enough inventory to be a palatable situation for the league or not, or if they really do because of what TV would want and require there, need to go add the 12th team. But I think it's interesting to at least go down that road of like, how would that work? Because the scheduling part, I know people think like, well, it's an odd number and it'd be really difficult to schedule. Like, how do you do that? Again, we are in unprecedented times. If it makes dollars and cents, you'll find a way to make it make sense when it comes to scheduling. Yeah, I messed that up. It should be a marketing guy here. If it makes dollars and cents, you can find a way to make the scheduling make sense. That would be the point that I would have on it if you wanted to go to 11. So actually, I agree with Robert Robbins on that. If it's going to cut that pie bigger for each individual school, get you an extra couple $1 million, whatever it might be, you are definitely going to do that, even if it means some awkward scheduling tactics. The interesting part about San Diego State here is actually that I hadn't even really fully considered San Diego State's Big 12, the viability of San Diego State in the Big 12 as much as I should have until this. And even after, last time coming on here and being like, I don't get why everybody with San Diego State advancing deep into the tournament is like, hey, now this is a slam dunk because, we've been told and we know that basketball really does not drive very much in the realignment conversation. But when it comes to the Big 12, I've been talking all this time about Brett Yormark trying to separate basketball, make basketball its own sellable entity when it comes to the TV rights. And now you'd find an extra way to make money. Well, that's where San Diego State's basketball success starts to make more sense, right? If he's trying to put together this basketball superpower, which I do believe is happening, that is a very real thing that could happen, is adding 4 to 5 basketball only schools. San Diego State would make a lot of sense there because it is not as far from just this year. I mean, that's been a great program. In fact, I'm curious to go look up real quick San Diego State basketball year by year. But they're a great basketball program. And what time zone are they in? They're in that extra time zone out on the left coast that Brett Yormark wants to be in. So they would help you add extra inventory in that time zone. They would help you get the after dark sort of slots. Their football program is solid, and then their basketball program has been very, very good. Very good for a long time. And so now you could be adding that. You could be adding that basketball school and getting West Coast stuff like that. That would, it now makes more sense why the Pac-12 has been so staunchly like, hey, you got to go do this and you got to go do it now to prevent the Big 12 from having any inkling of doing this, any opportunity for doing this. Now that I'm starting to sense how serious this basketball only part of the Big 12 thing might be, makes all the sense in the world that San Diego State becomes an ideal candidate as far as that goes. But okay, so San Diego State, they're obviously in the final tomorrow. First round last 2 years, but they won 23 games. Year before that, they were 30-2 in the COVID year. So that was going to be a big year, you would think, for them in the tournament. There is a stretch then of 4 or 5 years out of the tournament, but before that, third round, regional semi, so Sweet 16, third round, Sweet 16, third round, second round, Sweet 16, first round, and that was 7 straight years in the tournament. So you got 6, so 9 of the last 12 tournaments they've been in, with a couple Sweet 16s and now an appearance in a Final Four and a national championship game. So it's been a very good basketball program, certainly one worthy of respect and one that could compete in that sort of a league and could definitely be a real help there. So the San Diego State case, I'll read you more of Dennis Dodd's article coming up later on here. But Dodd, who's on the complete opposite side, obviously, of like Wilner Canzano here in terms of Pac-12, Big 12, even he's now pitching the same narrative, right? This has bipartisan support. San Diego State to a Power 5 conference has bipartisan support, everybody. Not a lot of things that we can all agree on in this Cold War between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, but one of those is San Diego State has definitely earned its opportunity to get a shot at a Power 5 league. Calico Willie, what's up, my man? Thank you for being here. And if you want to be, by the way, like Calico Willie, get your question or comment on the chat with over 200 people here in the chat. There's too much going on for me to get to everything. So please, if you would like your question or comment here on the chat tonight, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you can make your voice heard. It is how you can control the content that is happening on the show here tonight. And it is also a way for you to support the work I'm doing, bringing you Big 12 content on a week in, week out basis. Could not do it without your support, and greatly appreciate all of you guys who do take part in that. Calico Willie says, it just jumped on me, Calico Willie. It says, hey, John, so sad about the end of K-State and Big 12 basketball run, but super hyped for next football and basketball seasons. Just want to send some love. My man, Calico, thank you, and Ema to you too. Calico, I will tell you, I have been, as those of you who follow on Twitter know, I've been going like in and out of waves of sadness and gratitude and excitement when it comes to K-State basketball. Like today, it's honestly been a little bit more excitement because within the last 24 hours, we got news that Marquise Noel won the Bob Cousy Award for the best point guard in college basketball, which just warms my damn heart because that guy just deserves every good thing that is coming to him, including going to the rafters at Bramlage Coliseum. And Jerome Tang won Naismith Coach of the Year. So K-State has the Coach of the Year, the Point Guard of the Year, 2 All-Americans, and Elite 8, all in Jerome Tang's first year after taking over a team picked last in the Big 12 Conference this year. Pretty impressive. So that has me excited. There have also just been moments of like, look, yesterday I watched the end of the Michigan State game again, and it was just like gratitude for giving us a run that was that fun and exciting. But the day before that, like on Friday, I think it was, I was just like down in the dumps, very sad. Like this should still be us playing. Like what is going on here? It's been quite a process. The stages of grieving there with a season ending one possession away from the Final Four. I heard Jerome Tang did an interview with the Field of 68 guys that I heard earlier today. You can find it on my Twitter account at JL Kurtz if you'd want to see it. And he said the same thing that I think a lot of K-State fans have been saying. If Keontae Johnson is able to play more than 18 minutes in that game because he got saddled with the dumb early foul trouble, and when I say dumb, I mean 2 really bad calls in the first half of that game, he gets saddled with that foul trouble. Jerome Tang says if he doesn't, K-State would have won the game. The outcome would have been different, I believe, was the way that he phrased it, and I definitely agree with that. They went from down 5 to up 6 when he came into the game in the second half. So that is immensely, immensely frustrating. I'm going through all the ranges of emotions there, Calico, but we also have the excitement to look forward to next year. Tang was talking on that Field of 68 interview about what they want. They want a couple guards that have played 90-plus games in the Big 12 to come in next year, and he wants more of like a traditional 5, I guess, more of a traditional 5 than what they had this past year. Those are a couple things that he mentioned. So anyway, I'll try to keep the K-State basketball talk relatively short. But thank you, Calico. Always love talking cat hoops, and I'm sure we'll have a 3-Ma episode coming at you pretty soon. Delaric, good question. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking it. Delaric says, thoughts on Pac-12, possibly NBC Peacock deal. There was one blurb I had pulled up about that. Yes. Okay. Here we go. It is from Dennis Dodd, and it is from the article about how slowly the Pac-12 TV march continues to be. And he says, what are the Pac-12's linear broadcast / cable options? He says it has been suggested NBC could be a possibility, but it would likely feature games only on its non-broadcast properties, USA Network and or Peacock. And I know that somebody had brought this up. I don't remember who it was, and I don't actually have it on my note sheet here, so I apologize, Delaric, and to everybody else for that. I saw somebody bring it up and put it in the context of like, this could actually be perfect. This could be exactly what the Pac-12 needed to get this into the mix. I guess you could say that, I think it would pull them out of it is certainly better than having to go all streaming, right? Well, I'll put it that way. It is certainly better than having to go majority of everything streaming. But if we're talking about like the Pac-12 on USA Network, again, it's not all really about like news cycles and Twitter and how that's going to sound on Twitter and will it get made fun of, but like that'll get made fun of. That'll get made fun of. If it's going to be Pac-12 football on USA Network, that'll get made fun of. And from Big 12 country, maybe it's a little hypocritical when once upon a time I was watching Big 12 football games on Versus. Who remembers good old Versus? Like in the late 2000s, early aughts, we had Versus broadcasting Big 12 football games. There's been Fox College Sports. There have been a number of different ways to get your Big 12 football over the years. It would be, again, I think USA would be better than a lot of the pure streaming options, because you at least you have a way better chance of getting that on in a bar. Like places are going to have USA Network. I don't know. Do they usually have like Law and Order or something on there? I don't know, like SVU, and then rolling straight into like Arizona State, Arizona. I don't know. I guess that's the world that they're looking at. And then Peacock, obviously, which would be streaming too. Another thing that Robbins, the Arizona State president, the Arizona president. God, I'm getting all screwed up here. For whatever reason, the first and last name are so similar, I keep getting it all mixed up. But Robbins said the whole streaming thing, that's overplayed. I think this deal is going to have a heavy traditional analog cable piece. I think there may be some streaming in it, but I don't think anybody would want to go majority streaming. Again, I think he's right. I don't think anybody wants to go majority streaming, just like I don't think any of the four corner schools really want to leave if they don't have to. Moving sucks. Nobody wants to move. Nobody wants to go through that process, even if where you're going is better. But that still might have to happen. He's saying, hey, I think there will be a heavy linear presence here, and it won't have to be all streaming. But that is just I think for right now from Robin. So I guess in the end, to tell you, Delaric, I think it would be potentially a good option for the Pac-12, a better option than what it was looking like there for a minute, that it might have to be majority streaming. Maybe the top game or two get picked up by ESPN and put on, and then everything else streaming. USA Network would be better than nothing there. Peacock, decent streaming option that, people are. Then I guess if we're talking like, is it Peacock versus Apple or Peacock versus Amazon, what would be better? I don't really know. But people at least are familiar. People that stream things are familiar with Peacock. It'd be okay. I think it would be okay. I wouldn't frame it as the way I saw it from one person, that it was some like magic bullet here for the Pac-12. I don't think it's a magic bullet that's going to get them all the money and all the exposure that they've ever needed or wanted. But could that be a piece of getting a deal that is good enough to satisfy everybody for the time being? Sure. It definitely could be. I will say that. Calico Willie, what's up, Calico? Calico checking in again. Appreciate you, my friend. Calico says, went to Lincoln for the first time for a concert. Want to shout out the band Crowbot. They were just a good old rock band. Not sports, but so good. All right. Hey, shout out to Crowbot. And hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Speaking of Lincoln, I hope everybody saw that Nebraska is bringing back Frank Solich for its spring game. Okay. Nebraska clearly trying everything it can to reverse the curse of firing Frank Solich and being damned to Big Ten bottom feeder land, which is where Nebraska has resided for going on a decade now. Congratulations for Matt Rule trying to do whatever he can to break the curse. I don't know, Matt. We'll see. We'll see if you got the coaching chops to actually break through and remove Nebraska from the doldrums of the Big Ten. But anyway, hopefully you were, Calico, able to see Matt Rule, shout him out, and give him some love for bringing back good old Frank Solich to Lincoln while you were there for the concert. Juan, what's up, Juan? Juan checking in here, Houston fan. Great to see you, Juan. Always love having you in here. Juan says, we're not, and he's referencing Houston being ready in football. He says, we're not, John. I have no confidence in Dana at this point. I think Rice could become the next Houston in the AAC in 10 years. They were good in the Southwest Conference. Yeah, okay, now I think that is the conversation that you would need to have, right? Like Rice, can I make a food joke? I mean, Rice is still kind of in the box. Yeah, most of the time when I'm cooking white rice, you got to, at least if you're getting a minute white rice, it needs like 5 minutes in the microwave. I think first you'd need to go to the AAC and at least like get some water thrown in there before you go to the microwave that is the Big 12, if we're talking about like growth and development here. I don't know if that rice analogy totally held, but I had to give it a shot. I mean, it was just right there. It's food, it's rice. I had to give the analogy a shot. If they go to the AAC, that's the level that they're ready for to try and take that step. Okay, now you're in the AAC, a little bit more resources there. Let's see how that plays out over 10 years, and let's see how the game continues to evolve around you. Can you utilize being in Houston there? Now that Houston's up in the Big 12, like, does that kind of change the pecking order of everything? Like, I think that's it. Baby steps, basically, is what I'm saying. Like, Rice needs to crawl before it walks. That's kind of where they're at. The crawl would be the AAC. The walking would be, or perhaps running, even would be in the Big 12. So, yes. And I'm not even, see, it's funny to me, like, I don't even really know much about Rice's history in the Southwest Conference, because by the time I knew about them, K-State did a home and home with them in like 95, 96, I think it was. That was like my first experience with Rice, and they were not very good at that point in time. So I don't know a whole lot about their success in the Southwest Conference, but right now I do think they are pretty far away. And Juan, I understand the trepidation with Dana. I would be waffling for sure at best, I think, if I were a Houston fan, on how ready he is, whether or not he's ready. And I mean, certainly his comments, I get the nature of the comments. It's kind of along the same lines of what Bob Huggins was doing with his comments, saying that like Houston and everybody else coming into the new Big 12, they don't know what they're in for when it comes to dealing with this league in basketball. It's kind of like Dana trying to do the same thing, where you're saying like, hey, I've coached in this league before. You guys need to make sure you know what you're getting into here, and we need to be ready. I understand saying that to try and rally some money together and make sure that you have everybody on board financially to make things happen. But at the same time, that does not inspire a lot of confidence in me, and like what he thinks of the program and how ready it is going to be to jump into the Big 12. So I would certainly have some hesitation on that too. And some of it, by the way, is just, and I like Dana the guy a lot. I love the persona, I love the personality, I love the crazy hair, I love the Red Bull. But in terms of like his coaching chops, I think he's okay. I think he's an okay coach. I don't think he's a great coach. I think he's an okay coach at the Power 5 level. And I think like West Virginia fans would probably tell you that that's about accurate. And they certainly wanted better, and it had kind of run its course in Morgantown there. So the question now would be like, how much magic is left there with Dana in Houston? How many more 2021s are there going to be, or is it going to start to look more like last year did for Houston? So yeah, I get the trepidation for sure. For sure, my friend. Daniel, what's up, Daniel? Cat fan in Huskerland, aka Daniel Osborne. Appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for being such an ardent supporter of the channel. Truly, truly means a lot. Thank you, sir. Daniel says, hey, John, I just want to congratulate Coach Tang on Naismith Coach of the Year. Also, what do you think of K-State's chances in baseball this year? Looking forward to next year in K-State athletics. Yes, well, I will offer my congratulations to Coach Tang once again. Very deserving of the Naismith Coach of the Year award. Stupid that Shaka Smart got AP Coach of the Year, and I'm not even saying that because it had to be Jerome Tang, but like, I don't know, Dan Hurley, I don't know, the dude at FAU, and then Jerome Tang, like all three of those guys more deserving at this point than Shaka Smart. No offense to Shaka, but I would have put all three of those guys ahead of him in the pecking order. So that AP vote looks pretty silly. And that's a part of why I assume that vote was taken before the tournament started. With how much value we place on the NCAA tournament these days, that seems kind of dumb that that's the way you would do any sort of voting there. But hey, we've been dealing with that kind of crap with the Heisman for a very long time too. K-State baseball, I'll be honest, I am not nearly as connected to what's going on there this year as I have been in years past. Like even last year, I was still wired in a little bit closer. I'm just too far removed, and I didn't have the bandwidth here. K-State was on such a run in basketball that so much of my attention and focus was there that I have not paid a ton of attention. I mean, I know they're 5-4 in the Big 12, I believe, after losing 2 of 3 to West Virginia this weekend, which is good. And I mean, that's a better start to Big 12 play than K-State's had in a while. They swept Oklahoma at home for the first time in forever. I believe it was since the early 90s. But I do know the Big 12 is down this year. The Big 12 is definitely down. It is not the typical Big 12 with like 4 or 5 potential College World Series or super regional teams in it. So the league just isn't as good. And K-State's also had some bad non-conference losses. So I don't think they've been consistent enough in the midweek to really feel great about like a regional shot. But I'm also speaking, I say that with the caveat that like I'm speaking a bit out of turn here. Now, no matter what the Big 12 is like, it will be a more fun and entertaining season this year if K-State finishes above 500 in the Big 12, and like that would be great, and certainly some progress, I would say, from last year if that is the case, if they're able to do that, would be really fun to go watch. And I'm certainly rooting like hell for those guys. I mean, Pete Hughes was so good to me when I was working and doing K-State baseball games. Really, really do enjoy him. So nothing but good things to say there. I just don't know as much as I typically do. So I wish I could give you a better answer on that, Daniel. I truly do. But go tweet at my guy, Brian Smoller. He can get you filled in on whatever it is that you need to know. He does an outstanding job on the K-State broadcast. Same with Matt Walters too. If he's still out there on Twitter, I don't see him hopping on Twitter all that often. So both of those guys would be your go-tos. Daniel, what's up, Daniel? Appreciate you being here. Thank you for the donation. Daniel says Rice averaged 19,000 in 2022 football attendance. Yeah, that ain't great. That ain't great. 19,000 is definitely not ready for the big time here. You know, I mean, you look at stadium sizes when you're comparing it to the Big 10 and the SEC, the Big 12 is already pretty behind there. And that speaks again to just the sheer volume of some of these fan bases in the SEC and Big 10 that has helped propel them to the place that they're at in the college athletics world right now. The stranglehold that they have on everything at the moment. Rice would certainly not be helping the Big 12's average as far as that goes. Cougar Track says, John, a set time would really help. Okay, let me just go ahead and do this because you are right. You are right. And first of all, thank you for the support. Thank you for donating to say that to me when I said you guys need to just bug me to do that. Let's just do 7:30. Okay, I'm gonna try to, unless there are crazy extenuating circumstances. At least for now, we're going to try and get myself on track. 7:30. I'm saying it here on camera, on the live stream. 7:30 Central, always Central. 7:30 Central next Sunday. 7:30 Central. The midweek shows are where I will say it could be a little trickier with the time sometimes, and also just getting all. If things slow down, the midweek show will depend on the news cycles. I will say that much right now. Because I felt like, for instance, I went live on Monday, and then this past Wednesday, there just hadn't been much that had happened that was new. So I opted to just wait here until Sunday. And now we are probably a little bit overloaded with information on Sunday, but we'll say 7:30 Sundays, midweek. I will shoot for the midweek at 7:30 on Wednesdays, but that will be a little more time dependent on things going on. I no longer have 610 radio to do here in Kansas City on Wednesdays, so that will help clear a little bit of space for the time being. Our web, what's up, our web? Our web says the Pac-12 could get on NBC and Notre Dame road game weeks. Doubt it. Yeah, okay. I hadn't actually read that part. Everything I had read had been talking about more USA and Peacock. But if that is really it, and I will harken back to even Big 12 conversations. Remember that at one point there was a story, and I don't even remember who it was at this point, if it was McMurphy or Dodd. This has been a while, probably 6 months ago or so. But there was a story about NBC having some interest in the Big 12, perhaps. It was before pre-Yormark getting that TV deal done. That there could be some NBC interest in the Big 12, and then that had kind of faded. But it did seem like the thought at that time was that NBC was looking for maybe some shoulder programming or something for Notre Dame. This obviously becomes a bit of a different scenario if you're talking about Notre Dame road weeks and getting the Pac-12 on NBC. Now, if that were to happen, I mean, that would be that'd be pretty big. Even if it's just a couple games a year, those would do much better numbers just by simply being on broadcast television, being on network TV. That would make a substantial difference in the viewership numbers for the Pac-12 there if they could get it. So, hey, if they can get it, that'd be great for them. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'll have to do a little more digging on where the NBC stuff was coming from, our web there, because if I'm missing that as a legitimate possibility, that is my fault. David, what's up, David? David says, David, thank you for the support as always, my friend. David says BYU allows Utah to use their on-campus baseball stadium with free parking. Okay, so BYU again allows Utah to use their on-campus baseball stadium with free parking. Utah hosting USC last Friday night. Miller Park has a heated field. I've just seen a couple of tweets about that, David, and it seems like a very, very kind thing to do, especially in a rivalry that's so heated, to be allowing them to use your baseball field. And I mean, that's a hell of a place to play a baseball game too. That is, in terms of the views, that is as gorgeous as it gets. The baseball stadium that BYU plays at there. Would love to watch a game there sometime. So kudos to BYU for doing that, for being kind enough to do that. Tim, what's up, Tim? Tim asking the question of the hour. Tim trying to get me in trouble here. I kid, Tim. Tim says, what do you think of KU hiring Bill Snyder's son? Yeah, that was a story this week. Sean Snyder, the son of Bill Snyder, is now going to be, let me make sure I get his title correct. He's going to be on the staff of Lance Leipold. Nope. See, what's funny is I start to Google Sean Snyder, Kansas, and it autofills Kansas State in for me. So that's it's kind of the whole crux of the story, right? A special assistant. Just going with special assistant to the head coach. That's what it is. Special assistant to the head coach. That is Sean Snyder's title. Here's what I think. I think that is a topic that is very much driven to be a lightning rod topic, like made for radio, made for Twitter, absolutely made for Twitter kind of topic. And you've seen that happen with K-State fans fighting, K-State fans certainly being upset by it, Bill Snyder blocking a bunch of K-State Twitter. There's been a lot of fallout since it actually happened. In terms of what it actually means on the field, I don't think it's nearly as significant as just the shock value of the last name going to coach at Kansas actually represents. Sean Snyder, I think, has great special teams acumen. I mean, K-State has long been noted, obviously. I think most everybody in here knows that, for how good they have been at special teams. Sean Snyder played a huge role in that for years. He was an All-American punter at K-State. He's on the Ring of Honor at K-State Stadium, which, again, is a part of how weird this is for everybody and why it is such a lightning rod topic. So I'm sure and Kansas' special teams were dreadful last year. They were very bad. So I think Sean Snyder will likely help there. I know in the press conference, I was reading some of the quotes from the Sean Snyder press conference at Kansas, and Lance Leipold, I think it was, mentioned like he could help with planning out recruiting too, and said, hey, he's got all these relationships with guys in the state. Also very true, because he was around on Bill Snyder's staff the entire time. He was around on Ron Prince's staff. He spent a year on Chris Kleiman's staff. Like, yeah, he's got a ton of relationships across the state. I don't think it is some magic bullet is going to cure all of Kansas's ills and automatically like this will be the thing that takes them to a 10-win program. Like, if they do win 8, 9, 10 games next year, I think it will be because of everything else Lance Leipold is doing, with a little bit of, hey, throwing this in here. Because, the last 2 years, like Sean Snyder last year at Illinois, they had the 68th ranked special teams unit in the country. And the year before that at USC, it was 97th, I believe. His first year at USC, they were like 11th, and they were great, but they did not play very many games because of the Pac-12 and COVID. So, take that with a grain of salt, I suppose. But I think those are like the facts. I think it will help some. I think if you have the money and the resources to be able to devote that to a guy just being special assistant to the head coach, and you can kind of stick it to your rival and get a guy who knew the secret sauce of how K-State beat Kansas like a drum and has been beating them like a drum for as long as they have since George W. Bush was in office, then yeah, that's definitely a thing worthy of doing. I just don't think it's not as big a deal as it's been made out to be. And there are a lot of layers to it. I mentioned that Sean Snyder was on Chris Kleiman's staff for a year. I think that was my vibe with that, is that was kind of done as I don't know that Chris Kleiman would have done that if he had the ultimate total choice and authority at that point. And I don't think that marriage really worked very well because it ended after 1 year. So I would guess that there may have been some hard feelings there about that. And I don't, whether or not that actually plays into the decision to go to Kansas, I don't know. I would speculate that perhaps there's a little bit of that, but I'm sure a lot of it is just getting back closer to home, closer to family, and still being able to coach. So I think it's probably been overblown by all parties involved, honestly, myself included. I just got a little frustrated with the Twitter discourse at first. And so was probably a little snarkier with it than I should have been. But that's basically what I think about it. Definitely adds some interesting subtext to the rivalry and when that game is going to be played in Lawrence this year for sure. Jack, I'm glad you asked this, Jack. Hopping in with the donation because I had somebody ask me on Twitter this same question. They wanted me to address this on the live stream. So thoughts on Grant McCasland, who has now been hired as the head basketball coach at Texas Tech after winning the NIT championship. Tech had to wait a long time to make that hire actually official. And I know Tech fans had dreams of a huge name, which I get. They have a lot of NIL money. They have recent success to sell. They've been one of the best programs in the Big 12 over the last 5 to 10 years. They've been to a national championship game. So they've won Big 12 championship. There's a lot to like about the Texas Tech job. It seems to me pretty clear that they did take big swings. I think Rick Pitino, Jerome Tang, names like that, I think they probably did try, and it didn't work out. But landing with Grant McCasland, I mean, there's not been much better time to try and jump on board with a Baylor assistant, right? I mean, Paul Mills just got hired at Wichita State. Jerome Tang is the Naismith Coach of the Year. Taking someone from the Scott Drew coaching tree does not seem to be a bad move. I think if that's we didn't get the home run, but this is more like a double kind of a swat. That's how I view it. I view it as more like a single double sort of a hire for Texas Tech. I don't know that the upside is necessarily there that a Rick Pitino, for instance, would have had. But I think he can be a very good coach. Absolutely. He knows the league. I believe he's been at Tech before, right? Briefly. So he knows Tech. He's had a really successful run at North Texas. He's got head coaching experience, and he comes from what is now a very decorated coaching tree. And it looks like Scott Drew really had something great there for a long time with the staffs that he was putting together. My concern with McCasland, I think, would be what a lot of people have, is just the pace. I mean, they play such a slow pace. They're not fun, high-flying scoring a lot. That was the thing that was so refreshing about the way K-State played this year with Tang, is that it was a really fun style of basketball. Will this be visually appealing enough to truly maximize what you can do? I would have a little bit of concern about that. But I mean, the bottom line is that the guy has just won. I'll look up his year by year here real quick. So North Texas, they are 7th and 9th their first 2 years in the league, but then they win. They win their league, don't get to go to the postseason in the COVID year. Then they go to the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament. They finished first in their division in Conference USA last year and go to the NIT. This year they finished second in Conference USA, and they're the NIT champs. So it's been a pretty good run. I mean, he won 68% of his games at North Texas. He won 67% of his conference games. Basically has 2 tournaments because you didn't get to go in the COVID year. Basically has 2 NCAA tournaments and then won a game in the tournament back in 2020. So I think it's a very good hire. And Tech fans, I would just hope everybody's really on board there in giving that one a chance. So McMuffin, I appreciate you. Thank you for the donation, McMuffin. And thank you for your support of the channel. McMuffin, Baylor fan, says, stop talking about Baylor assistants, John. Please stop. No more. I can definitely understand that as a Baylor fan. Like the problem is, like, you guys were too good. Like Scott Drew was too damn good. And man, I love to see it as a guy who has loved Scott Drew for a long time, even when it was not cool to love Scott Drew. Man, I mean, I see that picture of his staff that had. There's a picture's been floating around of him on the bench with Mills, Tang, and McCaslin all there. I believe it was all those three. And then maybe even the guy who's at North Florida now too, and has had some success there. I forget his name. But yeah, like you guys, I mean, look, if you keep winning, McMuffin, you're probably, I mean, my guy, Alvin Brooks, I love Alvin Brooks. He was on Bruce Weber's initial staff at K-State. A great dude. So man, there's just, Scott Drew's been pumping him out. He's got the magic. He's got the magic there. So McMuffin, just look at it like this. It's a good thing if your assistants continue to be that wanted, because it means you guys are continuing to have a bunch of success. And what I would say, McMuffin, is, hey, you just keep Scott Drew happy. You just keep Scott Drew happy and employed as the head coach of Baylor University. I would love that if you guys can continue to do that. So anyway, Calico Willie, what's up, Calico? Calico says, John, want to send some thoughts to K-State Nation on the Sean Snyder thing. If Tang taught us anything, don't hate the opponent, love us. Well, that is very fair, Calico. And I'm trying to merge more into that mindset here, because again, it's not like I hated it from I'm so scared of what Kansas football is going to be, but like, I mean, K-State's paying Bill Snyder $250,000 a year right now to be an ambassador. Sean Snyder's name is on the Ring of Honor, and we're going to have a dude with the last name of Snyder coaching at Kansas. I mean, no, it's not my favorite thing in the world. It certainly is not. But yes, the reaction was mainly provoked by Kansas fans, and that is what obviously Jerome Tang's trying to get everybody away from. So you're right. We got to be better and be above the fray there, Calico. So I will echo those sentiments. Okay, if you guys want to join in on the conversation, like everybody else has already tonight, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you can make a donation, support the work that I'm doing here on the channel, and at the same time control the content that we have. Let me make sure I get to everything that I need to here. We have not talked about the Oregon and Washington part of the Wilner mailbag, which was an interesting chunk here. He was asked, how low would Oregon and Washington go in terms of partial revenue shares if the Big Ten comes calling? Why be a beta site for streaming college sports events when you can be a junior member of the Big Ten? So basically saying they're like, why would you hop on with this Pac-12 deal that's going to be experimental with how much streaming there is there when you could just go be a junior member of the big bad Big Ten? And Wilner makes some interesting points. I don't know that I agree with all of it, but there are some interesting points raised here. So Wilner says, your phrasing cuts right to the heart of the issue. Would Oregon and Washington accept being junior members of any conference? We are highly skeptical, especially given that UCLA would have full membership despite possessing a lesser football program than the Pacific Northwest powers. That is a fascinating point, and one that I had not thought about yet. I would still push back on it a little bit and say that, well, yes, I would for sure understand Oregon and Washington being like, what the hell? Like UCLA with that perennially disappointing, underperforming football program gets to be a full-fledged member and we are not? Excuse me? How does that work? At the same time, desperate times, desperate measures. And that's kind of been my point on a lot of the things that we've heard from Pac-12 country on realignment, academics, culture, like that sort of thing. We're like, I get it. And in an ideal world, they certainly care about it a lot. They certainly care about it more than most. But these are different times where like your survival is on the line here. If you want to, you can love your academics all you want. That may be all you have if you're going to cling to them too hard, because you will lose your spot at the major college athletics table. So it's just a different time with that. And I would just kind of say, like, they may not love it, but that would be a better scenario than being stuck in a deal they don't want to be in the Pac-12 if that's going to continue limiting what they're able to do financially and their recruiting wise and their actual standing in the college football world. I would still contend that desperate times call for desperate measures there. But then Wilner goes on to say this too. He says, but there's another piece to the discussion. And to be honest, the hotline often feels like we're in the wilderness on this matter while the public narrative focuses on the media revenue. It says the expanded college football playoff matters immensely in strategic decisions at the campus level. Let's say Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff presents a media deal to the schools worth $30 million per campus. Now, we've seen zero indication that Big Ten presidents are willing to expand again unless Notre Dame is involved. But for the sake of this exercise, we'll presume the Big Ten comes to Oregon and Washington and offers partial shares at 35 or 40 million per year. So, okay, his hypothetical is Oregon has two options on the table. Stay in the Pac-12 for 30 million a year, go be a partial member of the Big Ten for 40 million a year. And he raises the question, is that enough to counteract the competitive disadvantage that would come from switching conferences? So he is saying if the Pac-12 that had either 10 or 12 schools and lacked USC, the Huskies and Ducks would be competing with each other and Utah for the automatic college football playoff bid. In an 18 or 20 team Big Ten, they would be competing with USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and others for the automatic bid. I would just say, look, it's not, you can't, and he makes note of this, but you can't parse it all the way down to automatic bid. They would not have to win the Big Ten. You may well have to win the Pac-12 every single year to get into the playoff there. In fact, you probably would have to win the Pac-12 every single year in that scenario to be getting into the playoff. So you have more wiggle room. You have more grace in the Big Ten. Now, it is still a very healthy discussion as to what would be easier every year, just winning that version of the Pac-12 or finishing like 10-2 in that version of the Big Ten, something like that you would need to get an at-large bid to the playoff. It's a worthy discussion. I think that's a very healthy discussion and calculus that absolutely goes into this because playoff access does matter. And Wilner makes the point that, like, hey, for a school like Utah that would like to eventually get to the big boy table, making playoff appearances by continuing to win the Pac-12 would be the better way to go about doing that, which, I mean, they're not getting a Big Ten invite anytime soon anyway, so they wouldn't really have the option. But I get what he's saying. You become a part of the playoff, you give yourself to a chance to get some wins, and you just make your presence known, your presence felt in the college football playoff. That will help to start build a brand. And he is making the point that could have more value than being in the Big Ten. I would just say it depends on where you think you're more likely to be in the playoff every year. Do you think you have a better chance of going 10-2 in the Big Ten? Or do you think you have a better chance of winning the Pac-12 every single year, going 11-1 in that version of the Pac-12? And I think it's a pretty good debate. I think it's a pretty good debate as far as what that would mean. He says, we believe the playoff matters a great deal to the Huskies and Ducks, particularly to Phil Knight, who wants to win a national championship. But again, I would kind of say, being in the Big Ten, I would argue, gives you a better chance to win ultimately a national championship. If that's the goal, like if playoff appearances are the goal, Pac-12 may well be the better option. If winning a national championship is the goal, I think you're going to have a better crack at that by being in the Big Ten and competing with some of the big boys in the Big Ten, competing with Lincoln Riley's USC, competing with Ryan Day's Ohio State, competing with Jim Harbaugh's Michigan. I think that is going to be a better way to go in terms of knowing that you're playing the best of the best or close to the best of the best, recruiting against them, having a slightly more resources and just more exposure, people perceiving you to be better, easier to sell, I think, to recruits if you're playing in the Big Ten. I think the higher ceiling is as a junior member of the Big Ten in this scenario. If the goal is to just build up playoff appearances over time and try to do it that way, I mean, okay, it's probably more likely that you're going to make the playoff in that scenario. But if the goal really is Phil Knight wants to win a national championship, I would think getting into the Big Ten is the better play there. The other part of it too is just simply think about it like an internship. I mean, in the broadcast industry, we were always having to work unpaid internships. You get your foot in the door, and when they're ready to promote somebody and make a change, bam, you're already in the building. You're right there. You'll be able to just go ahead and go. Whereas if you're not, if you're still outside, that's a whole nother hurdle that you need to clear. It's a little bit easier to just work your way up, become a full member eventually, or have something else happen when you're actually already in the club. And like it takes away some of the uncertainty of like what happens to the Pac-12. Does something change? Is that TV deal short? And then after 3 years, you're looking for something else different. You're just back in that same scenario. I would just think some of the safety that the Big Ten provides would be very advantageous too. Let's see here. You got probably under 5 minutes here. If you want to get something in, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. To get your question or comment in, a way you can make sure that you get your question or comment in, control the content, and support the work I'm doing here on this channel. Also, if you guys could like the video, I would really appreciate that. Just a like, totally free. It's another way to support the channel. If you are catching it after the fact or you wait until after the fact, if you could also just leave a comment on the video, tell me you love me, tell me you hate me, whatever it might be. I would much appreciate that as well. And Jon-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you'd like to support the channel. That is another way that you could do that. Alpha Cat chiming in here. Alpha Cat says, McMuffin, welcome to the KSU pain of the Snyder assistant coach tree. Yeah, I mean, I will say this, Alpha Cat, the Bill Snyder coaching tree included a ton of guys from early on. Obviously, Bob Stoops, probably the biggest name there, but Mark Mangino was on there. Mike Stoops, Jim Leavitt, who resurrected the South Florida football program. Brett Bielema coached under Bill Snyder. There are a number of guys who went on to become head coaches there. And the problem, Brent Venables, God, how could I forget Brent Venables, also on that Bill Snyder coaching tree. And so, yeah, K-State was losing assistants a lot. And obviously the most painful example being 1998, Bob Stoops goes to Oklahoma. And as K-State is getting ready, the time in between the end of the regular season and preparing for the Big 12 championship game against Texas A&M, which if they had won, they would have been in the national championship. All those assistants, Mangino, Mike Stoops, Brent Venables announced they're going to Oklahoma. That created somewhat of a distraction. K-State loses in double overtime to Texas A&M and loses their best shot at a national championship. That is pain, my friend, from having your assistants plucked away. So that is true. I will at least say, McMuffin, you got your title. You got a title out of it. So I am at least eternally jealous because of that. So congratulations to you for doing so there. Brad, I appreciate you, Brad. I see Brad throwing in a donation. I don't see a question or comment attached there, but I appreciate your support, Brad. Much appreciate that. Okay. I think that might be about it here, guys. I think that might be about it. We'll see what's happening with the midweek. If I do pop on, I will make sure to try and do that at 7:30 on Sunday. Go ahead and plan on that. Let's do that next Sunday for sure. And midweek content, I'll try and keep you up to date. You can follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz if you want to stay a little bit more up to date there. Speaking of that, apparently in a couple of weeks here, the way Elon is changing up Twitter, you won't really be seeing my tweets unless you are following me. They're not going to send them out to anybody else. So make sure you get that follow, JL Kurtz here, before the next couple of weeks when the good old Twitter algo changes. Other than that, spread the word. Social media, word of mouth, friends, family, people who love your team, people who love this league. If you know anybody that loves college football, loves realignment, wants it from a Big 12 slant, make sure you get them here. Subscribe to the channel. Click the bell so you know what it is that I'm going live and when I am dropping content. Support the channel on Venmo at Jon-Kurtz-4. Like the video. All those things. You guys know my laundry list here that I hit you with at the end of the chat. Great to be here. Great to see you all again. Great to chat with you all. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.